Yeah, brilliant, great. Well, actually, first of all, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy days to come and learn about the National Benevolent Charity and our new Improving Lives Fund for Wiltshire and Swindon. I've spent pretty much all of my career working for not-for-profits, and so I can appreciate just how stretched you all are and how time-consuming fundraising can be. So thank you very much for taking the time to be here. I just thought it might be helpful if I do a really quick kind of snapshot of the organisation, a bit of a background, so just to have a bit of a context to our grant making. So we've been around for a really long time, over 200 years. We were founded by the late Peter Hervey in 1812, and at the time we secured subscriptions from the wealthy, principally to pay for pensions to tutors and governesses who work in private families who'd fallen on hard times. We established 4 committees in Bristol, Bath, Cheltenham and then London, so we've got a strong association with the South West. We were then incorporated by Royal Charter in 1859. And then when kind of welfare state subscriptions began to dry up, we kind of branched out into sheltered housing. Most of that property was sold by this year. And then with the arrival of the pension credit in 2011, we kind of moved towards making individual grants rather than pensions. And then in 2019, we merged with the Peter Hervey Benevolent Institution in Bristol, which significantly made grants to organisations. So that kind of brings us up to where we are today. So as I've said, we have this kind of long history of supporting individuals. Today we do that through what's called our welfare fund, and that fund is national, so people can apply from around the country, whereas making grants to organisations is relatively new to us. So we awarded our first ones in Bristol in 2019 as a result of that merger. And then last year, in response to COVID, we expanded into Gloucestershire, and we made just a couple of kind of foundational grants in Wiltshire and Swindon. That kind of experience has led us to kind of developing this more place-based model. So we're kind of targeting our resources to organisations long-term in those kind of specific areas of interest. So it's called our Improving Lives Fund. We launched it in July this year. So they are our 2 programmes, our Welfare Fund for individuals and Improving Lives Fund for organisations. And it's probably worth noting our office is in Tetbury. So that's kind of a snapshot of who we are, where we've come from. Our mission is to provide financial support to people experiencing poverty to help them in a time of crisis. Our core values, so we we try to respond to individual needs and circumstances. Compassionate, we never forget that people are at the heart of everything we do. And collaborative, we know that we can make a greater difference by working with others. So our Improving Lives Fund, so as I said, this is our grants to organisations programme. We have just one programme providing funding in the 3 geographical areas of interest, so Bristol, Gloucestershire and then Wiltshire and Swindon. So obviously today we're talking about that Wiltshire and Swindon fund. It's one programme, just with a slightly different application process for each area. So our funding aim is to make grants to a wide range of organisations which can demonstrate that their beneficiaries are experiencing poverty or hardship, and that their project, programme or organisation aims to alleviate that poverty and improve lives. I just wanted to briefly talk about our funding principles. I mean, grant making practice has been discussed widely since the pandemic, with kind of many UK trusts responding by becoming kind of more flexible and responsive, offering core funding, simplifying their application process and making decisions quicker. And we are all well aware of how challenging a time it has been for the voluntary sector. Many have had to rethink, you know, funding sources, business models, strategic plans. However, you know, you guys have shown kind of huge resilience and ability to adapt. So I think with all that in mind, we have just wanted to make sure that as we've developed our new Improving Lives Fund, we just have tried to ensure that it's not too structured and it remains accessible. We really want to stay true to our values. So we've kind of had these grant making principles at the forefront of our minds. So we're trying to be transparent and open and trusting. We provide core or flexible funding, so we want to continue to make those unrestricted grants. We feel that's really important. Ease of application process, so we're trying to keep the application process as simple as possible and to kind of maintain a quick decision-making process. Proportionate reporting, we're just trying to have as relaxed reporting requirements as possible. And then engagement and collaboration. We really want to invest in our grantee relationships. We know it's our grantees who have the expertise on the ground. So we want to kind of trust and listen to them and kind of be responsive to their needs. So these are the kind of principles that have informed our grant making practice. So who can apply? We are particularly looking to fund infrastructure or frontline organisations working with marginalised people. So we will consider proposals from national organisations for specific work or projects in our geographical areas of interest, but I think only where there are kind of strong local partnerships and where the outcomes have potential to achieve kind of a substantial impact in the local community. I think for us, given the scope of our funding, you know, we're not huge funders with huge pots of money. So for us, we're likely to be much more impactful by supporting kind of more small grassroots community groups or kind of small to medium-sized charities. Organisations don't have to be registered charities to apply. However, they do need to be a not-for-profit and have an agreed constitution. So what can you apply for and how much? So as I said, we provide flexible funding. Our grantee partners are our experts on the ground. We trust that they will utilise the funding in the most valuable way to their beneficiaries, and that we hope that by providing kind of unrestricted funding where the need is defined as shaped by the grantee, that enables them to kind of be more able to respond to kind of changing needs and priorities. So we will consider funding core costs, so things like salaries, general running costs, but of course we'll fund projects or capital costs too. So we want organisations to apply for what they most need. We will remain open to single or multi-year funding, and in exceptional circumstances, interim funding. Maximum grant we will award is £10,000 per organisation per year. Actually, what I haven't put in here is exclusions that might just be worth touching on. So obviously we make grants to organisations whose activities kind of fall within and are consistent with our objects. The kind of grant requests that we would not normally support are projects that exclusively serve religious purposes. So we do work with lots of religious organisations, but for projects that aren't just about their religious purposes, it might be kind of homelessness or food projects. We wouldn't normally consider political campaigns or kind of lobbying efforts. We wouldn't normally consider organisations that were set up just for kind of relief of or benefit of animals or plants. We wouldn't normally support one-off events unless the kind of wider context was kind of aligns to our charitable objects. So I think they're the main exclusions really, and we don't fund retrospectively. How do you apply? So all applications are submitted online directly through our website. The link is here, but it's just natben.org.uk. It is an open rolling programme, no deadlines, so applications can be submitted at any time and are reviewed regularly. We're trying to kind of reduce that administrative burden on applicants and grantees, so we're just trying to keep the process as simple and streamlined as possible. So we've got one short form for everyone who applies to ensure fairness. It's just a few simple questions to kind of capture contact information and to get a kind of basic overview of the organisation. But then that's to be submitted along with some supporting information, and for that there's no set format. It's really an opportunity for applicants to kind of share their organisational story and needs. We've tried to keep it simple and do that just to try and prevent any barriers to application for smaller organisations. But to support that, for people who might find it a bit daunting for kind of pulling together that supporting information, we have pulled together some guidelines that might help you think about what you want to include, which I'll come on to in a minute. But also, instead of kind of a Word document, you may submit a video or an audio or a PowerPoint presentation if it's something that shows your organisation and beneficiary needs clearly. We've done that just to enable organisations to use something that they might already have to hand or have submitted for something else, or something they produced for another organisation, basically just to try and kind of help reduce time spent on applications. And then I am contactable throughout the process. Just if you've got any questions or need any support, so my email's here, but I know it will be shared afterwards as well. So the guidelines for that kind of supporting information document. So we're asking for people to limit any Word documents to 1,500 words, or if you're submitting a video or audio file, for that to be limited to 5 minutes, please. As I said, there's no set format. We want to try and give everyone the freedom to share their story, but we've just put together some ideas, if helpful, on what people might like to include. They're just suggestions. They're not going to be relevant or appropriate to every organisation or application. But these, yeah, just some ideas. So a brief description of your organisation, so just overview, kind of aims, activities, developments. The needs, so what's the vital need? What are the issues that you're addressing? How will you address this effectively? And what difference does your organisation make? Summary of the funding requests, so how much is requested? What will it be used for? What's the period of the time covered? You may want to include timelines for expenditure or key activities. Impact, so maybe how is your organisation best placed to deliver work? You might like to include some previous experience or successes. You might want to put in there a few outcomes or how you're going to measure them, if relevant. Leadership. We know kind of inspiring leadership can make a big difference, so you might want to include things about leadership or board or other kind of volunteers or service delivery staff, people that are kind of leading the project or work that you're applying for funding for. partnerships. We know sometimes more can be achieved by working with others, so just a bit more on who you might be working with or how your work fits in with services that are already going on in the community. That collaborative side is always quite interesting to us. Again, we know we're not huge funders, so anything we can do to help kind of support and strengthen the community. A financial summary, so maybe a simple budget for the year that's relating to your funding request, or any usual sources of income or fundraising that's sitting alongside this application. You may also wish to include case studies or images or testimonials. Sometimes that can kind of help demonstrate how your work is compelling. One thing I will say is when you go online to make an application, you can see the process, the short form, the questions there before you submit anything, so you can save and come back to it. But it's only short anyway. And then the decision making. So we aim to work at pace to maintain reasonably quick decision-making process to support applicants. So we'll undertake an initial review of the application, and then all those kind of identified as eligible, we will go on to set up a phone call or a Zoom with the applicant, basically just to ensure that we kind of fully understand the applicant organisation and proposed work, to fill in any missing gaps or answer any questions. But we will always ensure that we send out, when we're setting up the call or Zoom, we send out the questions that are going to be discussed ahead of time, just to give you time to prepare. And then following the phone call, all applications are assessed against a framework, just to ensure that kind of consistency in the evaluation process and ensure alignment with our charitable objects. We will never assess on grammar or writing style. And then applicant will be informed of outcome, and any unsuccessful applicants will receive feedback, whether that's via email or phone call. In terms of timescales, for grants up to £2,000, we aim to make a decision within 1 month. And then for grants of £2,000 to £10,000, it may take up to 3 months from point of application. However, usually we're able to process applications much quicker, but that's kind of the maximum times. So reporting, so I suppose once a grant is approved, then we'll kind of notify the applicant and just ensure we've got all kind of details for electronic banking. For those larger grants over £2,000, then we will also kind of send out a grant agreement setting out terms and conditions. But in terms of reporting, so we aim to keep it as light touch as possible. The reporting requirements will always be agreed with the grantee partner at the time of making the award, so we'll kind of provide clear communication at that point on any expectations within our grant letter. But we do see the value in kind of open communications, and we'll consider a phone call or a Zoom or a project visit rather than the grant monitoring form. Or we would consider using any existing reporting frameworks you may have, or just a few simple kind of guiding questions. We're trying to make it not too onerous on our grantee partners, and just to make it a bit more equitable, I suppose, we kind of allow for the reporting to be led by our grantee partners, so they can elect their preference for format of report. But we do kind of want that relationship. We think it's really important to build those effective relationships, not only to kind of enable us to remain a flexible and accessible funder, but it helps our learning, and again, hopefully kind of works to strengthen the kind of voluntary sector and communities. We will also, as much as possible, ask for kind of photos, or we're really interested in kind of case studies and stories, just to kind of fit for use in our own impact reporting as well. I just thought it'd be worth ending on some top tips, and I can leave this up at the end when I take any questions. But obviously, do please read the guidelines. They are available on our website at natben.org.uk, and there's a section on organisational grants, and they're just there. Our key criteria, so it's about that poverty and hardship, and then obviously kind of the place for the work to be taking place in one of our geographical areas of interest. Preferred application is online. If someone is really struggling with that, then we would accept a paper copy, but ideally online, please. And just to keep it as simple as possible, simple language, ideally not use any jargons that we might have to research or not understand. So it's about people, improving lives for individuals and communities. It's an opportunity to tell your story, so kind of evidence that need and how you're meeting the need, how you're improving lives. And as I said before, I think those kind of case studies and pictures and evidence really do help to bring the story to life. Partnerships and collaboration, I know I've mentioned a bit. Again, for us as funders, as I said, you know, we don't have huge pots of money, and I think that working together to increase impact and strengthen communities is really important. It's something our trustees really value. When kind of sharing financial position and sustainability of the organisation, again, please be honest. We appreciate there will be kind of anomalies and things in finances and accounts. That's not an issue. It's just explain them if they're there, and then apply for what you most need. As I said, we're pretty unrestricted, so kind of just think about whether it's kind of that core or project that you need. On our website is also our impact report that will show you some of our grants last year. It might be useful to see the kind of things that we are funding. Get someone else to read through your application. Always finds that helpful with my applications. And then just to say that I am contactable throughout. So yeah, please just do get in touch if you want to just chat about your organisation or work, or if you think there's anything that you're not quite sure if you're eligible or whether it's something that we would support. Please do just contact us and have a chat. And yeah, think about applying. And then before I take any questions, just to say, I mean, obviously we've been around a long time, but making grants to organisations is new to us. So we are learning as well. So please feel free to provide any feedback as well on our application process, or if you're one of our grantees on working with you. It's really important for us to continually review our programme as well. So I will end there. I think I had until 11. Sorry, it doesn't leave much time for questions. But yeah, please fire away.
Brilliant. Thanks, Vicky. So I haven't had any questions in the chat. So if anyone has got anything specific they would like to ask Vicky, then please do raise your hand. Come in now.
I'll stop sharing. Sorry. There we go.
Brilliant. There we go. Lost you on my screen. Oh, there you go.
And I was going to say, obviously we'll send that. I was thinking about leaving that up for top tips, but it's much nicer if people can see faces for questions, isn't it? But you can share all that afterwards.
Yeah, will do. Stan, you had a question.
Yeah, on the hydrotherapy pool. This funding, would the hydrotherapy pool be eligible to apply for funding? If it feels with people with disabilities, mental and physical disabilities, and all that with them.
Well, I think, yeah, I suppose it depends. It depends on your beneficiaries, and I suppose if you can illustrate that they might be going through kind of financial hardship. I think there's bits of research out there, aren't there, which kind of show that living with a disability means you're more likely to kind of be living in poverty. Or so I think maybe if you can show, because for our board to consider it, yeah, it has to kind of tie in with that. I mean, poverty is a tricky word, and we struggled with it, and because I think it can have some negative connotation. You know, people might not, there's that sense of kind of dignity and pride, and I think sometimes poverty is a bit of a difficult word to come over, which is why I had in that brackets kind of hardship, financial hardship.
I wouldn't say like people would be suffering like poverty. It's where people are probably born with a disability, or as a result of an accident, or they've been in for operations and that, and you know, it's just a swimming pool for people to help them in health terms, sort of thing, you know.
Yeah, I think, I mean, yeah, in theory, yeah, it's like, yes, but I think it would have, yeah, as long as it can demonstrate a relief of poverty in some way. I know I keep on coming back to, but just because that is our overriding objects, and that's the first thing.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, can I go first? Just following on from that, I mean, we're probably the same scenario in that we're situated in a deprived area, and one of the things that we're setting up is like a lunch club, social day, things like that, for people who are in our area that are lonely, old, all that sort of thing. So they're not necessarily poor in terms of money, but poor in terms of social interaction, or getting out of the house, or that sort of thing. So I'm not quite sure where the qualification comes.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think maybe if you kind of support it with stats, like deprivation stats on the area, on where your beneficiaries are kind of, where your clients, visitors, whatever you want to call it, are coming from, then that would support the application. Okay, well, we'll be in contact then. Okay, great.
I'm the same sort of thing, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, it sounds quite similar for everyone, but I suppose that is that first question, I suppose, that our board would come to, would be, yeah, is it helping to alleviate poverty?
But there's different sorts of poverty. I think that's the question. If you were to sort of say it's monetary poverty, then that's clear. But obviously poverty exists in many different forms and in many different places. And that's the ambiguity that I'm finding with it anyway.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, maybe say financial hardship then, I suppose. I mean, it's difficult because so often, yeah, if we're talking about kind of that financial side of poverty, so much it comes hand in hand with some of the other issues that people might be talking about, like social isolation or things, but it doesn't always. But for us, I think just because our charitable objects are all about that relief of poverty in that traditional, in the financial sense, I think that's what the board will always come back to.
Thank you. Dan, you had a question.
Hi, Vicky. You mentioned multi-year funding. What's the maximum multi-year funding that you can apply for?
I think at the moment, we'd probably look at 3, not beyond, again, because of our size. And given that it's quite uncertain times at the moment.
And then obviously, if you go for the 3-year funding, you're not successful for that, would you still be considered for 1-year funding? Or is it just, say the application is based on a 3-year funding plan and that was, for whatever reason, denied, would it still be considered for 1-year funding?
Yeah, I mean, I can't necessarily see a situation where that might happen, because I'd say either you're either kind of eligible and someone that we feel we could work with and they're meeting our charitable objects, in which case I don't see why we wouldn't support the 3 years and we would go for the 1. But right, yeah, okay. If for some reason that you were eligible and everything kind of met our criteria and 3 years didn't happen, then yeah, I can't see why we wouldn't consider 1. But yeah, I think it's unlikely that we'd be in that situation and wouldn't support the 3.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi Louise, you've got your hand up.
Hi, yeah, I just wondered if it might help people if you could give us a couple of examples of grants that you awarded last year, because I think that people are struggling with where the poverty bit comes in. So I'm just wondering if you could give us a couple of examples of where you did fund an organisation and what it was for, because I think that would help people.
Yeah, last year, almost all of our funding ended up going, a huge amount of it, towards kind of food security. And I think probably because even like where we might have supported a homeless organisation, like for example, one we were supporting a shelter in Bristol, and the shelter had to close, so all of our funding got diverted towards a food programme that they had set up in place of that. So last year there was a lot of support towards yeah, that kind of food poverty side of things. I mean, do you want me to give specific examples of organisations? I mean, for example, the ones on our impact report that we've highlighted from last year, for example, are things like working with Fair Share Southwest, yeah, Caring in Bristol, who we were supporting their shelter, but it was diverted towards their Cheers Drive project. A drop-in centre in kind of the Stroud region. Again, a lot of what they did before was provide that kind of safe space for people to come to and advice and put them in touch with external agencies. But again, last year it became a lot about kind of getting food parcels out to those people that couldn't come into the centre, where they'd often have a meal when they went in. We have supported well, say our kind of 2 initial kind of foundational grants in Wiltshire and Swindon. One was to work with young carers, providing kind of outreach activities for them, and one is to work with refugees with kind of training programs, English language programs. So I suppose if you look at both of them in that sense, a lot of the young carers are from families on kind of lower incomes, and the refugees, again, it's giving them support to enable English to be able then to kind of be more to gain employment or training opportunities.
Thank you. I just think it helps to kind of give some examples of the sorts of things that you have funded in the past. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Vicky. Thanks, Louise. I think Cher has got a hand up, and then we've got one question in the chat, and then we'll move on, if that's okay, and we can answer any questions post event.
Thanks. I was just inquiring about match funding. So if the overall cost of like a salary or a core cost or the project is more than your 2,000 or your 10,000, will you accept that the organisation can match fund that or get a partner funder?
Yeah, of course, we wouldn't need to fund the whole costs. Again, I think it's about that kind of having a conversation about how confident you felt about kind of meeting the shortfall. But yeah, match funding is great.
Thank you. And there's a question from Stephanie in the chat. So looking at the geographical location, if an organisation is working both in Wiltshire and Gloucester, can they apply twice for their work in each local authority area?
Yeah, it's something we've just started discussing a bit more internally. Again, I think it would be really good to have a chat to anyone who's in that situation and think about kind of best way forward, because we're still fine-tuning kind of elements like that. But I can't see why not, that you wouldn't be able to apply for 2 funds or twice, you know, funds in each area.
Yeah, and is there a top? You talked about medium-sized organisations. So, is there a maximum turnover that an organisation would have before you consider?
No, I don't think we'd set maximum. I mean, no, we haven't set that at all. I mean, sometimes I do wonder, like, if there's an organisation with a 5 million turnover and they're applying for £5,000, and then another organisations come in who might seem much more in need. I suppose in terms of looking at the impact of our funding, I think, you know, if it's between a couple of applications, I think. So I'm struggling to. There's no set limit, but I suppose I just feel like we would be more impactful for smaller organisations, but there's absolutely no set limit at all. Okay.
Brilliant, thank you. So really helpful. Probably just if you've got a project you want to discuss, perhaps contact you directly, Vicky.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's always the best way. Just give us a call, and I think it's really helpful to have a quick chat and for us to talk about it before making that application.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, and we will share Vicky's slides and all her contact details via email after the event. So if I just hand over to my colleague now, Karen Hobbs, and we will quickly whiz through the Foundation's current grant programmes available at the moment.
Lovely, thank you very much. Yeah, so I'm sure many of you will have heard this one already, but at the end I'll be just going through some of the other programmes that we have open. So we've got our own community grants programme that are open sort of all the time, and then we've got a few grant programmes that are running for specific funders that have some either specific geographical areas that they cover or specific types of projects. So I'll try and whiz through those for you. Let me just get the right screen up for you. Ooh. Oh, sorry. And there we go. Okay, so just a reminder, what the Community Foundation actually covers is we are known for our grants to groups, but we do also have grant programs for individuals, mainly in sort of education area, which Nicola manages for us. But we do also provide a level of information and advice for groups, for example today, but we do also have some one-to-one sessions that you can book onto, and other sort of training and workshops that we do. We obviously are a fundraising organisation ourselves. We have to get the money in so we can give it out to other people. So we do a lot of work with donors, whether that be, you know, corporate donors or individuals or other trusts, and supporting people sort of who want to give within Wiltshire and Swindon to work that's happening in the area. And then the other part of our work is we do try to explore the need in our community so that we're informed in terms of our grant making. And we have recently commissioned a report that's bringing together all the statistics around Wiltshire need in Wiltshire and Swindon, which you can access on our website, and may help to provide important evidence for your applications, not only to us, but to other funders. So hopefully that will be a good source of quick access to that sort of information. So our community grants programme, this replaces what people may have previously known as our large and small grants programmes, our foundation grant programmes. We've now put them together in one programme called Community Grant. We got a bit of echo there. Try to take learning from how we did things during coronavirus, you know, the sort of main part of the crisis, trying to make things as flexible as possible. So our programme, very similar to what Vicky has said, we support people and communities in need in Wiltshire and Swindon, and we fund projects and activities that improve people's lives. We can offer grants for 1, 2 or 3 years. Our minimum grant really is £750 a year, and our maximum is £5 per year for 1, 2 or 3 years, depending on what you want to apply for. If you're applying for a capital programme or a project of some description, the maximum you can apply for is one lot of £5,000 in a year. You have to have, if it's towards a larger project, you have to have the majority of that, the rest of the funds available, because you have to be able to start spending our grant within 6 months of it being awarded. Our priorities again are, because of our size, our grassroots, so very small and medium-sized organisations. Again, we are focusing on people on low incomes, people facing sort of, significant financial challenges, i.e. who couldn't afford to pay for the full cost or cover the full cost of an activity themselves in some way. We have got some priorities this year, and they are particularly around addressing the impact of the pandemic. We want to particularly support work with children and young people because they have been very impacted by coronavirus. We want to look at things that prevent or alleviate poor mental health or improve mental well-being, and also to tackle poverty and inequality. So we know a lot of inequality was highlighted during COVID, so particularly work that's going to happen with communities that have been affected. So people from Black and minority ethnic communities, people with disabilities, all sorts of people have been particularly affected. And we are happy to consider applications that fall outside of those 4 priorities, as long as you can evidence that you've identified a need. As long as we know what the need is that you've identified in your community, and it fits that that overarching issue of the people who will benefit are people who are living on low incomes or experiencing financial difficulties that mean they can't cover the cost of that support themselves. You can apply for a grant to either continue something you're already doing, so core costs to keep something going, or a new activity or project. And that includes, like I just said, core costs or running costs, project and activity costs. And as I said previously, it can include capital costs for buildings and equipment, but only if you already have the rest of the funds that you need. And then you must start to plan spending any grant that you get awarded. You must be in a position to be able to start spending it within 6 months of when it was awarded, because ideally it would be spent by the end of that year, or if you're awarded a multi-year grant, each year you are able to spend the amount that's been awarded. Obviously, if you experience any difficulties, you contact us and we will renegotiate, but ideally you should be in a position to actually start spending the grant. So it needs to be something you can start quite quickly. And then who we fund, same again, we can fund a constituted voluntary or community organisation. You don't have to be a registered charity in that circumstance. We do fund registered charities or not-for-profit companies, including community interest companies, but they need to have at least 3 directors, and the majority of whom must receive no payment from the company. So the shorthand is essentially you're a community interest company operating like a charity. You can't be currently holding a new community grant if you apply for one, so you can only hold one of our community grants at a time. The grants that I will talk about, the grant programs I'll talk about later, are separate. You can also apply for those, but you can only have one of our grants at a time. So it has to be spent and reported on before you can apply for another one. Organisations need to be a local or a regional organisation, so i.e. based in Swindon or Wiltshire or in the southwest, but the beneficiaries of any grant must live in Wiltshire or Swindon if you're a regional organisation. Branches of national organisations can apply, but they must have their own local management committee, own constitution and own bank account. So eligibility requirements, so things you must have in place are an active voluntary management committee, so who are really engaged and involved in running the organisation, and there must be at least 3 people, and they cannot be related. So you can have people who are related on the trustee board, but you have to make sure at least 3 people are on the board are not related to each other. And that means you know, includes living in a long-term relationship or even living at the same address, so you don't have to have the same surname. The following financial arrangements and documents need to be in place. So you must have a bank account with 2 signatories. Again, they can't be people who are related to each other. You must have less than 12 months running cost in unrestricted reserves. We need you to have some form of financial records or accounts so that we can see what comes in, what goes out, and how the money is being managed, and whether spending is reasonable. A financial plan for the current year, that's something that we learned through coronavirus. It's really handy just to understand in an overview sort of spreadsheet or document what the financial situation of the organisation is at the time, so what they think the year is going to look like in terms of income and expenditure, so we can see very clearly where our grant would fit in with your overall financial plan. So it doesn't have to be a complicated thing with lots of words, but we just need to be able to see what the position is. Obviously you need to have a constitution of some form. We're trying to focus also on safeguarding and equalities at the moment, just in terms of good practice within the voluntary sector. It's things we're working on ourselves. We're not suggesting we've got it right or we're the experts in any way, but we need to make sure that any activities that we do fund are done so safely and that are inclusive to people, whether that be because of their race or their gender or their sexuality, their level of disability, etc. So we'll be looking at people to at least have some knowledge of their responsibilities under the Equality Act 2010. And then new organisations who don't have any of that in place can still apply, but it must be done under the umbrella of another charitable organisation that does have those things in place. Okay, what we don't fund, so our community grants don't fund anything that will be paid to individuals or families. We can't fund activities which duplicate an existing service. So it's really important in applications that you tell us, you know, what else is in the area that you operate in that does something similar and why your service therefore is still needed, even though somebody else is doing something similar. We can't fund one-off or sponsored events, the advancement of religion or medical research and equipment, animal welfare, political party activities. We've already mentioned individuals. We don't fund schools or statutory bodies, although some of our other funds that I will mention earlier do. So it's really, really important just to check on the criteria before you apply. So that was a whiz through our community grants. The other grant programs that I've mentioned, because we run the programs, we use very similar sort of process for, you know, our due diligence. So we'll be asking for very similar things in terms of information from you, but these programs do have, will have a similar but slightly different application form because we're doing them on behalf of other funders. So this week, yesterday in fact, we opened the Wessex Water Community Fund. It's really important to note this does cover Wiltshire but not Swindon. So it covers the area within Wiltshire that receives their services, water and sewerage, from Wessex Water. So if you want to apply to that, please check that you fall into that area for either water and or sewerage from Wessex Water. I've just realised I should have updated these slides because the grant programme is actually now up to £3,000. So that's good news. Very similar to our community grants, they fund projects meeting local community needs. They're particularly interested this year in things that support financial capability, helping people facing financial difficulties, but it can be any local community need, obviously with a priority around those communities where people cannot afford to cover the cost of the services themselves or are lacking services or access to services in some way, because of maybe rural isolation, for example. So that opened on Monday and it closes on the 22nd of October. We have a very small fund, very specific to the Hayden Wick area of Swindon. So if it doesn't, you don't have to be based there as an organisation, but if you do have any beneficiaries that live in that area of Swindon and you think you can put a case for supporting them at a cost of up to £3,000, then please do apply for that. That will be opening later in September on the 27th. We also work with the High Sheriff and the Police and Crime Commissioner. And we have a fund that previously we've sort of run it twice a year. We've obviously got a new Police and Crime Commissioner at the moment, and the High Sheriff changes every year. So we're speaking to both of them at the moment about exactly what they would like to do. But we're hoping that we will run a single fund sometime in the first part of 2022, and that will be grants up to £3,000. There's a very specific focus on tackling antisocial behaviour and crime in local neighbourhoods and that sort of thing, you know, and reducing offending and violence. So if you're, you know, working with anybody and you think those sorts of issues, you know, you're tackling those sorts of issues, then do consider an application to that pot. And then again, another one that's sort of largely focused in Swindon, but a few areas that sort of sneak into Wiltshire around Swindon are covered by the very concisely named Science Museum, Wrought and Solemn Park Community Benefit Fund. They are focusing, as you could imagine, on sort of science, technology, engineering, maths, environment, those sorts of things. They do cover activities that are health and play, but they have to have some link back to the technology, engineering, maths and environment. So for example, it could be a play area for children that focuses on you know, nature and conservation, for example, or focuses on energy saving, that sort of thing. So it's got to have a link to those, what they call the STEM subjects. So they're large grants up to £20,000 for projects, but the beneficiaries must live within 10-kilometre radius of the solar park in Wroughton. So we've got a little map with a circle on it, and we'll try our best to work out who fits into that. So if you're not sure, let us know. They also do run a small grants programme of up to £2,000, but that is just for people living in very, very specific areas that are listed there. So Wroughton, Chiselsden, etc., etc. So if you do work with anybody in those very specific areas around Wroughton, then again, you may be able to put in an application for that. Obviously, please do share this as well with any organisations you think that might come under that. The thing to mention about the Science Museum or the Solar Park Fund is it does include schools. So if you've got any schools that might be interested in applying. Similarly, with the Wessex Water Fund, it does include town and parish councils. So if you've got any links with town and parish councils and you want to encourage them to do something that's going to help your organisation or help your beneficiaries, then they would be able to apply for the Wessex Water Fund as well. Right, I think that's most of what I want to say. I'm probably running out of time, aren't I? So this slide is just a few other sources of support that we have. We do have a funding database on our website, and also My Funding Central is a national funding database which is free for very small groups, so there may be a charge for other groups. Wiltshire Together is a website that Wessex Community Action has been putting together, so I would recommend having a look at that, because you can link in with lots of other organisations in Wiltshire particularly, but I think Swindon organisations are welcome to join. We work quite closely with Community First, Voluntary Action Swindon and Wessex Community Action, so they're all good sources of support. And obviously the National Council for Voluntary Organisations, their know-how website is really good if you need any support with, particularly with your sort of governance and those sorts of parts of putting together an application. And then also I find this resourcecentre.org.uk is brilliant for small groups. It's actually an organisation based in Sussex, but I feel that they've got some really good information on there for supporting small groups with running their organisation. And just a few future events we've got going. So I mentioned the one-to-one advice sessions that you can go onto our website and book onto those if you want to speak about something specifically with us, particularly around governance or funding. And then our upcoming workshops on Friday, we've got our Using Commercial Thinking in Business Planning to sorry, I can't actually remember what. Oh yes, drive not-for-profit growth, which I think I've seen Sadie on the call today. So I think Sadie, you're running that for us. So that's fantastic. 29th of September, we've got Understanding Need in Wiltshire and Swindon. That's the report that I mentioned earlier. This needs analysis that we had done. So our colleague Margaret is going to cover how you could use that information to support your applications. And then on 30th of October, we've got Motivating a Remote Workforce if you've still got people working from home and out and about. And then we also run a couple of networks. We run Swindon Connecting People Network, which will grew out of some work around loneliness. So that's all sorts of organisations that are working with people, just sort of connecting them to each other and their communities. And on the 7th of October, we've got we've got the Swindon Connecting People and we've got the Wiltshire Connecting People workshops, and that's all about working together. And you can book any of those via Eventbrite or via our website.
Brilliant. Thanks, Karen.
That's
Great.
right.
So I don't know if anyone's got anything specific they want to ask us about our community grants or any of our other grant programmes at all. Please raise your hand. If not, I don't think anyone has. Oh, David.
Put me on speaker, sorry. Just to say thank you very much. You've given us, I think, 2,000 for 2 years running towards this organisation, which is good, just a bit of PR for everybody in case anybody in Salisbury knows somebody who needs a day centre. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Does anyone else got anything they want to ask?
Oh,
Yes, just a quick question. Obviously, it's stated that you don't want anybody that's working with the county council. Now, obviously, we're working on a referral basis, and we're finding more and more referrals coming from various departments of the Wiltshire Council. When we've asked them how are they going to fund this if we don't step in, there is no funding anywhere for it. So if they don't come to us for help, there is no help for them.
Yeah.
Is that going to work against us?
No, it's that we wouldn't fund the council or the parish council, so we can't fund the statutory bodies themselves. A lot of what we do fund, obviously, is filling in the gaps of what the statutory services can't provide.
Yeah.
So no, that wouldn't affect it, Dan. No, you're fine.
Right. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Anyone got anything else at all? Don't think so. That's brilliant. So, just to thank Vicky for coming along and some further information about the National Benevolent Charity and their grant programmes. As I said, we will be sharing these presentation slides and we have recorded the event as well. So if you want to go back and listen to it at some point in time, we'll make that available via our website, and we'll send you links to all our other events that are taking place as well. Thank you for your time this morning, everyone.